We have a guest in the studio from the Katiba Institute. The Executive Director, Christine Nkonge, is here with us. We want to talk about the new IEBC circular and the letter to the political parties. Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you, Eric.
And thank you for joining us. Happy midterm.
Thank you.
And also, as we have to remember why, particularly these days, a public holiday,
Yes.
is because we are remembering the late former president, Mwai Kibaki. Yesterday, we had this conversation because the day before yesterday, the IEBC wrote to political parties and they brought a matter to their attention as if the political parties were not aware of this. But just assuming that political parties had just been born, Wafula Chebukati, the chairman of the IEBC, wrote to them and reminded them that Katiba Institute had gone to court in 2017 on the matter of the truth and gender principle and application of it. And the High Court had addressed itself on this matter and issued several orders touching on political parties and touching on the IEBC. You are Katiba Institute's executive director. So just give us a background. What did you seek when you were going to court?
Okay. So I think to even understand this matter better, we need to go way back to the 2010 Constitution, which we passed on 27th of August 2010. And this constitution was required to be a transformative constitution to transform our society politically, economically, and socially. So the idea was to address past ills or past mistakes and therefore move the society to a more inclusive and democratic society. An inclusive society also mandates inclusion of all persons or gender in governance. So that's why this constitution required, under Article 10, inclusivity, participation of the people, equality. Those are values and principles of governance. When we are making any law, any policy, any government practice, we need to have those principles in mind. Then the Constitution then said, under our electoral system, one of the governing principles is that not more than 2/3 of any elective body shall be of one single gender. So either gender cannot be more than 2/3. And then we have, under the Bill of Rights, Article 27 on equality, which says women and men should have equal opportunities in employment, in political, in economic and social spheres. Then now we go under the same Article 27, a requirement that under elective and appointive positions, we should not have more than 2/3 members of anybody being of a single gender. And Article 100 actually said, Parliament, you are under an obligation to pass legislation to actualize this principle. The Constitution said any law that was required for the better regulation of any aspect of the Constitution needed to be passed within 5 years of the Constitution coming to force. That is 27th of August 2015. That was the deadline. And Parliament could extend it by 1 year. So the deadline in essence was 27th of August 2016. All laws to regulate different aspects of the Constitution were needed to be passed by Parliament. So let's go back again. Around 2012, just before the first elections under the 2010 Constitution, the Attorney General went to the Supreme Court to seek an advisory opinion on whether the 2/3 principle, to the gender principle, was immediately realizable during the 4th March 2013 elections. And the Supreme Court said because the context, the legal framework cannot be put in place, so it was not immediately realizable except for county assemblies. And they gave a deadline of 27th of August 2015 by when Parliament should have passed the legislation. The deadline came and passed, no legislation. In 2016, a number of organizations, civil society organizations, after the deadline passed, went to the High Court and said Parliament is in contravention of the advisory opinion, and advisory opinion, as the Supreme Court has said, are binding. Then the court said, actually, it's correct. They have gone beyond the deadline. Persons have applied to court for redress. The court gave Parliament some more time, 60 days. Get your house in order, pass this. They appealed. The Court of Appeal said, no, you had a deadline, you extended it by 1 year, and you still had not passed the law. And this is in 2019 when they're appealing. So Parliament, on the basis of this, then parties, the Chief Justice wrote an advisory to to President saying Parliament should be dissolved, because of failure of passing the necessary laws. And that process was only stopped because the Parliament went to court, and that's pending in court right now. So we can see we've had a long struggle of trying to realize that's gender principle in this country. And what Katiba Institute thought, because Parliament does not seem to be invested in passing a law, and because the Constitution says it can either be legal measures or other measures, why don't we go to court to actually have the court expound on this principle of other measures to realize that's gender principle. And that's why we went to court on the basis that IBC has a mandate under the Constitution to regulate the nomination process for political parties. And within that process, they need to ensure political parties have complied with the law. And one of the legal requirements is that's gender compliance, including in the nomination process. And so the court agreed with us and said a reading of the Constitution indicates all bodies, whether they are political parties, whether it's IBC, or whether it's Parliament, they are bound by the Constitution. They are subject to it. So IBC has the obligation to regulate the process of political parties' nominations. And one of the requirements is gender compliance. So when they're approving the party lists, the nomination list, they must ensure that's gender compliant. They have an obligation.
So, Christine, all of these, there are very many elements to this, and they all come together to make, part of this big piece. Now, before we go to whether Parliament was invested in actually having done, because we saw the whole chronology of lack of quorum. I think lack of quorum was cited 4 times. We also saw that there was the appeal process. So obviously then they could not debate in the House when an appeal process then was taking place, etc., etc., etc. And we saw now another 3 years down the line, nothing was done. So we could probably discuss for days about whether Parliament was interested in doing this or not. But I think it is also important to look at the import of this rule so that we can now then understand what is happening with IEBC at the nomination process. What exactly are we asking for here with this 2/3 gender representation? What exactly are we saying? Because there may be misinformation that folks think there is almost forcibility element that is saying you must put a woman or a man in this position. What exactly are we saying here?
Okay. I think we all agree that political parties are gatekeepers to the composition of Parliament, right?
Yep.
You need to have a ticket supported by a political party or as an independent candidate for you to be able to get yourself into Parliament. So, of course, then Parliament is a critical vehicle through which we can achieve that's gender composition in Parliament, because they are the ones who determine who at the ultimate, at the very end, will get into Parliament. So that is one of the main reasons why political parties need to be aware and need to implement this law. But more than that, going back to your question, it's because the Constitution requires it. We enacted this Constitution for ourselves with the realization of historical injustices that had occurred before because of improper or unbalanced representation of women in Parliament. We had instances whereby you would get discriminatory laws, policies, practices being passed because of the lack of voices of women to be able to advocate for some of these issues. And because of the fact that women are critical members of this society as well, they should have a say in the governance of this country. The last census basically said we are almost 50-50. We are essentially 50-50. So by not, you're actually removing equal representation to half of the population, and with that comes many other disadvantages.
So we're
in
saying at the very
governance.
least,
Yes.
let them be up for selection.
Yes.
Let them at least be there to make a decision, because in the past,
Yes.
they were precluded from even being on the selection panel, as it were.
Exactly. So the idea is that it's now for political parties to carry out their work of finding women who agree to their political ideology and therefore are willing to run under their party tickets, and actually to ensure that those women are given opportunities within the party nomination process to run for different elective positions.
But you see,
Yes.
there are those who would argue that is coming with the assumption that the political parties have made deliberate efforts in the opposite. That political parties have programs that suppress women's voices and women participation in the party processes. And political parties will come and tell you, no, we are an open party. In fact, if you look at our membership, a majority of our members are women.
Yeah.
Now, if from a majority of our members, it's not a majority that seek elective posts, we have not been the ones who have stopped them from doing that. In fact, we encourage members to apply to be leaders of the party. And they're the ones who haven't. So what exactly is it that political parties are expected to do in this particular case?
Okay. They're supposed to take deliberate guidelines and measures within their nomination rules to ensure that whatever nomination processes they undertake result in a gender-compliant nomination list. And let's not forget the history of patriarchy in our society, entrenched patriarchy in our society, so that you don't even need to do anything. You might do seemingly innocent measures with no ill intent, but still result in discriminatory result because of the system. The system itself would result in that result. You don't even have to intentionally say we are suppressing the voice of women or oppressing the voice of women, but the system itself will lead to such a result unless we take intentional measures to change that system.
What intentional measures? If today Christine Nkonge became a leader of a political party, what would you do that you haven't seen being done with the other political parties? What are these intentional measures that a political party could take?
It could come in many forms. And that's why this decision did not say you need to do it in ABC. It said, I'll give you the freedom to devise whichever method that you think you'd need to ensure this result. It could be, like has happened in some other places, that you say for certain elective positions, we are only, and in certain regions, in certain territories, we are only allowing for women candidates to come up for nomination. It could be that you decide that, for us to meet this quota, we need to ensure that we increase our representation of special seats also. But it has to be a method which will guarantee a certain results. And the most direct one is the one where you actually say for certain positions in certain territories.
So you ring fence some
Yes,
constituencies
you
and areas and
exactly.
say female candidates only.
Yes, that could be one of the methods where you come up with this.
I actually find this argument that has been put forth by some legal minds and maybe politicians about how it is they encourage women within their ranks to vie for position, or they encourage them to participate in the process. It's disingenuous in this sense. The opportunity to actually legislate these things, unfortunately, speaks of the complete opposite in terms of their participation. Because every time these issues came to Parliament, something or the other that ensured that the whole process would be aborted is what occurred. And we've seen instances when other issues come to Parliament, especially when they're discussing things like raising their remuneration, salaries, what are the other things that they get called?
Allowances.
Yes, that's the thing I was referring to. My friend, Parliament is chock-a-blocked. So, yes, they say, but by not putting in place what you call affirmative action, things that are deliberate, then that argument of theirs, unfortunately, is mute. Because what exactly are you saying if you're not doing it? What have you done to actually prove that what you're saying is what you mean?
You know, I want to play the devil's advocate on this conversation. You know my position on this. I am a biggest supporter of this particular principle. But is it possible that political parties and even members of parliament are actually reflecting what the society thinks and what the society feels? And I say this with full cognizance of what we heard from the callers yesterday. Many of the callers who, when we were having this conversation and saying, is it because, is it a good thing that the IEBC has now come and drawn a line in the sand? People are calling and saying, but look, this thing cannot work. It's not realizable. Is it that there's no sufficient pressure from the ground? There's no sufficient either understanding or buy-in by, let's even start with the members of political parties who include women on this whole hula baloo of, let's have a third gender, two-third. It's one of those things that are,
Christine, maybe you can shed some light on this as well, because I think about it and just what Eric is saying, that maybe it's just a reflection of what society wants and says, you know what, we as members of parliament, legislators, we're only just expressing what society wants. But if I can liken it to what happened with female education, that the society believed for the longest time, traditionally, that young girls should not go to school, that their future was vested in whom they shall marry and to whom they shall bear children forever. It was until some men in the society, same society who said that they did not want these children to go to school, insisted that their daughters go to school. It was after the education process that the rest of the society began to see the benefits of sending girls to school. It was somebody who went against the grain and said, I am sending this girl to school. Let us see what will happen thereafter. It was then that the society began to change. Are we then saying, look, you may think that this is your traditional way of thinking, but let them be up for selection, and then you will see what will happen. If it doesn't, fine. But wait and see what will happen if you at least give them an option, give them a chance to be selected. We know that on your own, you will not make the choice. But now let us almost ring fence and see the benefits that will occur when you have somebody in that position.
And exactly that's it. Because just carrying your argument forward, if we have accepted that we should educate our women, we should educate our girls because it promotes their, economic and social and just general outlook in life. It increases them, the ability of them to live a more dignified life, right? So if we've said that that is proper, that is right, are we saying that these highly educated women therefore do not have anything to offer in terms of governance and leadership in different spheres of our society? Because that's the logical conclusion I would take that to. What we are trying to say is this. I think when the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission was going around the country seeking views on what the problems we are facing under the previous constitutional regime. And one of the issues that came up, which was not actually a disputed issue, was the issue of representation of women, greater representation of women in governance. They indicate, and in fact, at the CKRC report level, they had even given a formula of how to achieve that representation in women. If it was single constituency member voting, they had provided for a third of the list of the party list. If it was proportional representative voting, they had provided for 50% of that, so that at the end of the process you would have a conclusion whereby you have a third of the membership being women. So the fact that the people of Kenya voted in this constitution overwhelmingly means that they were convinced about the place of women in society. So I think this, what can I call it, a narrative, is so before even we try this solution, we are already saying it's going to fail. And that is still, I would think, a hold up from the old system. this old patriarchal system, that even before we try it and see how it will work, as you said, let us put their names on the ballots. Let them be on the playing field, and we see the result of that. Because this is just one of other measures that we could employ in ensuring to that gender representation. If countries like Rwanda have been able to do that, where they have overwhelming, quite a large number in political governance being women, I think we can also be able to do this. It's just we need to try it first. Don't put roadblocks in front of this process. And moreover, this announcement by IBC is about 5 years after the court decision. Political parties had 5 years to seek advice, to brainstorm, to do everything they needed to do to be able to ensure the nomination process that is supposed to end this week. They will have complied, and they have not done that. And this decision was not appealed, so this decision is binding. So it cannot be that at this moment is then we are acting surprised. This provision is already also in the Political Parties Act. In fact, the recent amendments to the Political Parties Act by Parliament actually bolstered the ideal of two-thirds gender representation by political parties. They say political parties shall promote two-thirds gender compliance in their nomination processes. This amendment took effect on 27th of February this year. So if they are even themselves giving the understanding they have this requirement, I do not believe it is genuine to right now act surprised and say this will not work.
Actually, no.
Surely they reserve the right to be surprised at anything.
They may have assented to it, but it's now that the consequences are dawning on them. And goodness gracious me, you mean this is what we did?
And this is what will happen.
Guys, I want to remind you again.
Yes.
Political party is not just the owner of the party.
Yeah.
They are the people who claim to be the members of the party and who claim to be the supporters of the party.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a word from members of parties, from supporters of parties, even in those 5 years. And that's my point. Why is it that the memberships of these political parties have been quiet?
You know, IBC and political parties have had the obligation to publicize this decision.
Yes.
It could be that some members, this is the first time they're hearing about this decision.
All these members are aware of the Constitution.
They could be aware of, but they are aware of the Constitution. As you said, because they passed the Constitution by 67%.
An overwhelming majority of Kenyans voted this formula.
Exactly. So it is not a surprise. It really is not a surprise.
The thing that I find interesting, you see, when you talk about political party members, are political party members known to express a uniqueness of perspective, or are they known to follow the loud shouts of their leaders, or to follow the wind and the trend that is at that particular point in time considered to be fashionable? Look, that we have in this debate tells you there's resistance. That it's a subject of this debate and it's getting more intense tells you that
something.
Those who already are in positions who feel that they are likely to occupy certain positions are not happy, because the moment you include affirmative action, some of them see their chances reduced.
This is the Situation Room.
Christine, back to the conversation. Wafula Chebukati has written to the political parties. Some of them are saying, Buana, no, you misinterpret what was said by the court. I'm going to read, this is what was written by Professor Tom Ojienda, Senior Counsel Professor Tom Ojienda, who is vying to be the next member of the Senate for Kisumu County, nominated by ODM. And he has written to his party's National Elections Board telling them, my friends, I write to you in objection to the IEBC circular on the implementation of the two-thirds gender principle issued to all registered political parties yesterday, the 27th of April. The said IEBC circular is sub judice. The circular also misinterprets the two-thirds gender principle as envisaged in the Constitution of Kenya. Moreover, the circular infringes on the democratic principles and the principle of universal suffrage upon which Kenya's electoral system and the processes are anchored. In the circular, IEBC is purporting to implement the decision in the High Court. IEBC then proceeds to purportedly interpret the said decision and apply it to political party nominations pertaining to the 290 constituencies and the 47 counties. I object to the circular on the following grounds. 1, the matter of implementation of the 2/3 gender principle as pronounced by the High Court in that particular matter is the subject of an ongoing court process. 2, the IEBC circular misinterprets the 2/3 gender principle as set out in the Constitution, Article 81B, which says that not more than 2/3 of the members of elective public bodies shall be of the same gender. It's unconstitutional and contrary to this article of the Constitution to apply this principle on the 290 constituencies and the 447 Senate seats. He also says implementing this directive as suggested in the circular is bound to offend the gender aspirations of the Constitution because it fails to take into account several issues. 1, the special seats specifically set aside for 47 county woman reps. It also forgets about the additional 12 nominated members of the National Assembly and the 16 seats set aside for female nominated senators and the 4 persons to be nominated in the Senate to represent youth and persons with disabilities. He's basically saying, look, IEBC has just gotten it wrong. This thing, IEBC is overstepping.
Okay. So I do not agree with senior counsel at all. First and foremost, I think he has misapprehended our decision, the Katiba Institute decision, and the other case that is pending before the court, and therefore the use of sub judice here is not applicable. The case that is before court is the one that is talking about legislation to ensure 2/3 gender compliance. Our case is not about legislation, it's other measures to ensure compliance with the constitutional mandate of 2/3 gender. So it's not sub judice at all. This decision...
Sub judice means?
Sub judice is, you cannot, it's basically like if something is pending in court, you cannot give an opinion on it because then that could embarrass the court later on if the court was to say something different.
It might interfere with the process.
Yeah, it might interfere with the process. So basically, our decision is settled. It is now law because law in this country can be created in different ways, either through parliament or court decisions. Because this law was not, this decision was not appealed, it is now settled law and they cannot get away from it. Okay. And if IBC does not implement, then they will be in contravention of the law. So basically, you are asking IBC to contravene the law because they must abide by this court decision.
Their hands are tied.
Their hands are tied. Their hands are tied because it's now law.
So contrary to what some folks have been saying, that what we're seeing now is the proverbial gnashing of teeth of IEBC. That's not the case.
No.
All they're doing basically is translating or either implementing what the court has said. Say, folks, you need to do this, otherwise we will not allow you to move forward.
IEBC is obeying the law. It's actually obeying the law because otherwise it's just basically telling IBC to be in contravention of the law, and that will subject them to other penalties under the legal system because you cannot be in contempt of court decisions. So I do understand where he's coming from.
Where is he coming from?
I do not know. Basically, let me rephrase it. I do not understand.
He's an interested party. You see,
yes, where he's coming from. Maybe because
IEBC has said, if, let's say now, he has been nominated by ODM, if ODM presents a list of nominated senators and it does, that list is not compliant with the 2/3 gender rule, the full list, including Tomo Gender, SC,
all of you,
is rejected.
Is rejected.
You know, I was listening to what you're
because
reading,
now there's
Eric,
blood in the water.
and I was thinking to myself, yes, as a layman, it's legalese, yes. But are these not the sort of argument that should have been presented to court, say, on appeal?
Exactly.
And say, okay, yeah, we've seen this decision, but given A, B, C, D, and X, Y, Z that has preceded 1, 2, 3, then perhaps, but coming now, surely.
But isn't it just practice that we see that courts will say things in this country and they're not really going to pay any attention to them because there is this thinking, fallacious as it might be, that nobody's actually going to do anything about it. It will not be implemented. It will not be insisted upon, and thinking that this is just another opportunity to jump past the court order. But here the folks are saying, sorry, we're not going to allow this anymore. 5 years down the line, yes, but we're not going to allow this anymore.
Yeah. In fact, the nomination nomination rules that were approved by IBC in November last year required gender compliance. It's not even a surprise. They even knew before they started the nomination process, they needed to have gender compliant party lists. And that was actually within their own nomination rules of political parties.
So we're saying the senior counsel here probably ought to have advised his party on this matter even before they went to nomination. Say, folks, let's get this thing in order.
Exactly.
So that by the time we're nominating, we don't have an issue.
Or at the very least have been intimate with the details of what this thing said in the first place, across board in parties.
But by the time you become senior counsel, surely we assume something as fundamental as this that even a layman like myself can understand.
Not only that,
And,
Professor.
but it's exactly what has been said. They did not think this would be enforced. They did not think there would be repercussions. So it was business as usual. But then now they've been reminded about this decision. And
Okay, let's now come to reality, Christine.
Yes.
We know that IEBC is constantly being bombarded with political pressure. Look at what they came out and said. Look, presidential candidate, when you come to us, come you plus your running mates. And this is the timeline. Oh, no, Bwana, we don't have enough time. They have said, all right, we'll extend some time. This particular circular is saying, come with gender compliant party lists. And within 48 hours, if you have not amended and adjusted, we reject everything in totality. Is it likely that, political parties now are going to raise all the pressure and push IEBC to say, okay, maybe what you can do is this particular time, because, there was COVID, so you can apply it next time. If they do that,
Are they allowed to do that?
what would you do?
They're not allowed to do that because, as I said, it's the law. You cannot decide when to apply the law. You don't have that leeway. The court actually said because this case was brought by Katiba Institute around March of 2017, and the nomination process was ongoing then for the 2017 election. And the process for nomination was to end 26 April 2017, and the decision was given 20th April 2017. And the court recognized at that time, because the nomination process was coming to an end, so logically, we cannot create more confusion in the process by saying that a decision should apply in the 2017 election process. But the court said it's only in the 2017 election process it was not to apply. It therefore meant any other election process moving forward, it is a legally binding requirement that you comply. And IBC is an independent body. It is not under the rule, dictation of political parties. One of the problems we've been having under these countries is actually to have faith in the veracity of the election process. And IBC cannot perpetuate that by being seen to play second fiddle to political parties. Political parties are subject to the law. The IBC is subject to the law. We as Kenyans are also subject to the law. So we cannot create differentiation of classes of saying, oh, these ones are bound by law and these other ones are not, can decide when or whether they should exercise the law that is required of them. So IBC must implement this decision as required by the law.
I do get a bit anxious, though, even as then we hear what then IEBC would want to implement. And that then the actions of political parties, who may then know that they're in contravention of some of these requirements, will then rush about to make sure that there are now names of either gender on the list. And that what would then happen is that you have a dilution of the process that this is trying to enact in the first place. That you're trying to get them to understand that it is important that you have gender balance, but then now, because they do not want to get themselves in a sticky spot, they're just going to throw names at a list. Doesn't that then now go against the very spirit of what was tried in the beginning?
Yeah. But then let me ask, why do we keep on moving the line when it comes to political parties? If you are aware, at the 26th of June, you are supposed to pay your taxes and you comply. Why do we keep on shifting the boundaries when we come to political parties? When they are aware of processes 5 years in advance and they do not comply, then at the last stage say, now it's impossible for us to comply because of this time scheduling, because of pressures of time, because if we are not able to do it within time, because then we'll not be able to have proper nomination processes. I think that to me is actually entrenching a culture of impunity.
I get it, Christine, but IEBC is still saying to political parties that we're going to receive your list. We're going to go through the list. If we find that it is not compliant, we're still going to give you 48 hours to get compliant. Now, that's my problem.
Yeah.
In that 48 hours is where we're going to have a bungling of things where Indu's name will be thrown there. Christine, do you want? Yes, okay, put you there. And then we're going to have a diluted process yet again.
That irrespective, and I'm not saying that is likely to happen, under the law, whether I agree with it or not, there are different processes and how political parties can nominate their candidates. There's direct and indirect processes.
Yep.
And they should have known that if, let's say, we are not compliant, what can we do to ensure we meet these
meet
processes?
compliance.
So this could be another way.
Exactly. And there have been decisions even in other past electoral cycles whereby decisions have been made by court or by political parties on compliance or nomination of certain things, like candidates who were running for nomination challenged the result and they went to court. And then the court said, okay, we deem this process to have been illegitimate. You have 48 hours to rectify it. And they did. And nobody complained. But when it comes to women, again, double standards are applying at every juncture of this process.
You've mentioned something here. This is entrenching a culture of impunity. And we've said it here on the show many times, that we are in a situation, and I don't even know at what point we got into that situation, where in an election process, the stakeholders are the candidate, the election manager, and the voter. In a democracy, the voter is the most important person in this, because the voter is getting to exercise his sovereign will of actually delegating the sovereignty to an elected person to exercise it on their behalf, right? So you'd expect that the voter is the one that you want to listen to all the time and give. But the candidates have become the most important. The candidates can actually sit and say, bana,
I don't like this.
tumepatwa na homa, hatutafanya election this year.
Eric, there's
And the election manager is then pushed by the candidate.
You see, one of the things that our esteemed guest has mentioned is the independence of these institutions. Note, operative word, institutions. The people who are charged with managing these institutions clearly have a different understanding of the word independent, because they are susceptible to influence. And that's where the problem arises. The institution is independent. It's in the Constitution. Everyone knows they do not have to succumb to influence, yet they do. Meaning, even with the independence of that institution, the maturity that is required for someone to understand that actually I'm doing this on behalf of this entire nation, not at the behest of a few individuals who may think that they have a bigger say than the rest of the country. But that isn't the case. It doesn't come out. But why is it that all these commissions that we have, some of them independent, you still have issues coming up? Because the individuals who are there, whether they're at the board level, whether the management level, somehow the understanding of independence is not complete. They are susceptible to influence and the vagaries of whoever it is in power, whoever it is who is their chosen whisperer.
Because of the political hand in everything that this body does.
Yes.
Look, at the appointment of commissioners, politics is involved.
Yes.
Because the panel that selects the commissioners includes political parties.
Yes.
Then they are vetted by politicians. When they are seeking budgetary allocations and they're reporting, they'll go back to the politics. So there's a lot of politics and political influence that maybe interferes with their independence. Do you agree, Christine?
I would say to the extent that Kenya has been the case in the last 10 years. Let's not forget that this August marks 12 years since we passed the 2010 Constitution. We have rule of law challenges. Rule of law challenges, and rule of law is an understanding that everyone is bound by the law, whether you're a politician, whether you're a state officer, whether you're a public officer. principles of governance and the values of governance, good governance, indicated that, what we had hoped through this constitution is that you get leaders of integrity within Parliament. So even though those processes that are meant to encourage openness, transparency in how commissioners are appointed. Remember before, these were all done by the president, right?
Yep.
So we are trying to expand the process to make more people involved in the process, to ensure the process has a bit of integrity and openness. But because of the failings of Chapter 6 of our Constitution, I have to say, then we get into a lot of these problems, including undue influence or unjustified influence in commissions which are supposed to ensure adherence to constitutional standards. But I have to say that we have to, as Kenyans as well, since we are stakeholders in the process, we have a voice as well. It's not only IBC,
We
it's
are-
not our
we are the
political
ultimate
parties.
voice.
Yes, we are the ones who will require observance of the Constitution. Because remember, one of the reasons that took us to 2007, 2008 is the people did not have faith in the electoral body then. Are we starting to make inroads in ensuring that Kenyans again will start questioning the independence and the decision making of IBC?
Yep.
And we're going back to the same place that we are trying to take ourselves from. So Kenyans are also equally stakeholders. The women of this country require and really deserve a place in the table to try and move governance issues in the country. It's not taking away from anyone. It's not a competition. It's an issue of representation,
Yep.
dignity, and non-discrimination.
Indeed.
Exactly.
Christine, thank you very much for joining us today. Christine Nkonge is the Executive Director of Katiba Institute. We've been talking about this requirement that political parties must meet the gender threshold as they present their nomination list to the IEBC. IEBC has said, come to us when you're clean. If you're not, we have a kashawa out there. Go shower and you come back. Thank you, Christine.